I woke up at 2:17 in the morning to a bank notification that said, "Transfer completed, minus $300,000. And for a few seconds, I forgot how to breathe. The bedroom was dark except for the pale blue glow of my phone, resting face up on the nightstand beside Robert's old reading glasses. Those glasses had not moved since the night before he passed, because some part of me still believed that if I left them there, the room would not feel so empty. But that night, the emptiness was not what frightened me. It was the number on the screen. $300,000. Nearly everything Robert and I had built together across 44 years of marriage had just vanished while I was asleep. My hands were stiff with panic as I sat up, pulling my robe tighter around my shoulders. The house was silent in that heavy way houses get after midnight, when every sound feels too loud. The furnace clicked on in the hallway. A branch scratched softly against the window. My heart beat so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tapped the banking app, thinking it had to be a mistake, some glitch, some delayed message that looked worse than it was. But the app rejected my password. I tried again, slower this time, pressing each letter like I was handling something fragile. Rejected. Then a message appeared saying a verification code had been sent to a phone number I did not recognize. I stared at those last 4 digits, trying to force them into meaning. They were not mine. They were not Robert's old number. They were not my son Michael's. I called Michael first, because mothers do that, even when their sons have grown distant. The phone rang 5 times before someone answered, but it was not Michael's voice. It was Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, calm and low, as if she had been expecting me. "Eleanor," she said, "why are you checking your bank account at this hour?" I froze. Not because she sounded annoyed. Not because she had answered my son's phone at 2 in the morning. But because I had not told her it was my bank account. I had not told her about the notification. I had not said a single word yet. "Where is Michael?" I asked. My voice came out thin, almost unfamiliar. "Sleeping," she said. "You probably misread something. These apps confuse people all the time. People. Not you. Not mom. People. As if I were already being moved into some category where my fear could be dismissed before it was even heard. I looked down at the screen again, and beneath the transfer amount, in small gray letters, I saw the phrase that made the room tilt around me. Authorized user confirmed. Vanessa was still speaking, soft and careful, telling me to go back to bed, telling me we would sort it out in the morning, but I was no longer listening. I was looking at Robert's glasses, at the empty side of the bed, at the phone in my trembling hand. That was the moment I understood the money had not simply disappeared. Someone had opened the door from inside my own family. I sat at the kitchen table until sunrise, my phone lying face down beside a cup of coffee I never drank. The house slowly changed color around me, from black to gray to the soft yellow light that used to make Robert say mornings were proof that life kept its promises. I almost laughed when I remembered that, not because it was funny, but because the house had kept its shape while everything inside it had shifted. The maple cabinets were still polished. The little ceramic rooster Robert bought at a roadside market in Pennsylvania still stood near the stove. His favorite mug still hung on the hook closest to the coffee maker. But I no longer felt like a woman sitting safely in her own home. I felt like a guest who had just discovered someone else had a key. After Robert passed 18 months earlier, people told me grief would come in waves. They were right, but they forgot to mention the paperwork, the death certificates, the insurance forms, the bank appointments, the polite voices asking for account numbers while I was still trying to remember how to sleep alone. Vanessa appeared during that time like a blessing I had not asked for but thought I needed. She brought chicken soup in white containers, folded my laundry without being asked, and sat beside me at the dining room table with a pen in her hand, saying, "Eleanor, you should not have to carry all this by yourself." I wanted to believe her. Maybe I needed to. Michael had been quieter after the funeral, always tired, always rushing between work and his own house 30 minutes away. When he did come by, Vanessa spoke for both of them. She said she was good with forms, good with technology, good with keeping things organized. I had spent most of my life balancing checkbooks with a pencil, mailing bills before the due date, and keeping receipts in envelopes marked by month. I was not helpless, but I was lonely. There is a difference, though people like Vanessa know how to blur it. She helped me install the banking app on my new phone. She said the old password was too simple and watched over my shoulder while I typed a new one. She asked for my security answers in that bright, practical voice of hers, the one that made concern sound like common sense. First school, first pet, mother's maiden name, Robert's birthday, our wedding date. At the time, each question felt harmless, like a lock being strengthened. Now each memory returned with a small, sharp edge. One Sunday after church, she brought a folder with colored tabs and told me it was routine estate cleanup. Michael was in the living room watching a football game with the volume low. He already looked it over, she said, touching my shoulder. It just keeps everything simple. I signed where she pointed, because I was tired, because my son was in the next room, because Robert had always handled the larger financial details, and I was ashamed to admit how much I missed his steady hand beside mine. That was the part one hated remembering most. Not that she had asked, that I had trusted her. After Robert died, I still clipped coupons at Kroger, still drove my old Buick even when Michael offered to help me choose something newer, still kept the thermostat at 68 degrees in winter because habit is stronger than comfort. I was not living like a wealthy woman. I was living like a woman who respected what her husband had left behind. Robert had worked too many long weeks, missed too many Saturday breakfasts, and come home too many nights with tired eyes for me to treat our savings like free money. Before he died, he held my hand in the hospital and said, "Ellie, do not let anyone make you feel guilty for what we built." I thought he meant strangers. I thought he meant salesmen, banks, taxes, the ordinary pressures of getting older in America. I never imagined he was warning me about someone who would call me mom while memorizing the answers to my security questions. By 7:30 that morning, I had showered, dressed in my navy cardigan, and placed every document I could find into Robert's old leather briefcase. Bank statements, insurance letters, the folder Vanessa had brought, my driver's license, my marriage certificate. My hands were steadier by then, not because I was calm, but because fear had turned into something colder and more useful. Before leaving, I looked once more at Robert's empty chair. "I am going to find out," I whispered. Then I locked the door behind me and drove to the bank alone. The bank opened at 9 o'clock, but I was already in the parking lot at 8:40, watching employees walk in with travel mugs and key cards as if the world had not tilted during the night. I kept both hands on the steering wheel of my Buick and tried to slow my breathing. Across the street, a school bus stopped at the corner, its red lights blinking in the pale morning sun. Children climbed aboard with backpacks bouncing against their coats. Life was continuing in all its ordinary ways, and somehow that made what had happened feel even more unreal. When the doors finally opened, I walked inside with Robert's leather briefcase held against my chest. The lobby smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. A young teller greeted me with a practiced smile, but the moment I said my name and asked to speak with Janet Collins, her expression changed. Janet had worked at that branch for more than 20 years. She had known Robert back when he still wore suits to the office and brought me peppermint candies from the glass bowl on her desk. When she came out of her office and saw my face, she did not ask me to explain in the lobby. She simply said, "Come with me, Mrs. Whitaker," and closed the door behind us. I placed my phone and the bank notification on her desk. She put on her reading glasses, looked at the screen, and for the first time that morning, I saw someone else go still. Not confused, not doubtful. Still. She typed quickly, her eyes moving across two monitors. I watched her face more than the screen, because people who work with money learn how not to react, and Janet was trying very hard not to react. Was it a mistake? I asked. She did not answer right away. That silence told me more than I wanted to know. After a moment, she folded her hands on the desk and spoke carefully. "The transfer was completed from your savings account into an escrow account connected to a residential property purchase." My mouth went dry. A property purchase? I did not buy a property. Janet glanced back at the monitor. "The receiving account is tied to a closing office in Charleston, South Carolina." Charleston. I had not been to South Carolina in 12 years, not since Robert and I drove down for our anniversary and stayed 3 nights near the water because he said I deserved to see the ocean without checking the time. Janet continued, "There was a trusted family access authorization added to your profile 3 months ago. That access was used to initiate the transfer." I opened the briefcase with stiff fingers and pulled out the folder Vanessa had given me after Sunday dinner. "Is this it?" Janet took the papers, and the color in her face faded slightly. She turned one page, then another. "This appears to match some of what I am seeing. I never understood these forms. I said. My daughter-in-law told me they were routine estate cleanup. Janet looked up at me when I said daughter-in-law, and something passed across her expression, small but unmistakable. Who is listed on the escrow file? I asked. Her lips pressed together. Mrs. Whitaker, there are limits to what I can disclose until our fraud department opens a formal review. I nodded, but I did not look away. I had spent 44 years married to a man who negotiated contracts for a living. I knew when someone was avoiding a name because the name mattered. Janet exhaled quietly and turned the monitor just enough for me to see a line of text without touching anything. I saw it. Contact. Name, Vanessa Whitaker. For a moment, the office seemed to shrink around me. The framed certificates on the wall. The tissue box near the phone. The little bowl of mints Robert used to tease me for taking two from. I stared at Vanessa's name until the letters blurred. Janet turned the screen back. You need to contact an attorney before you call your family, she said softly. Not after. Before. I opened my mouth, but no words came. She slid a printed copy of the transaction summary into a plain envelope and placed it in front of me. I will begin the internal report. I also recommend that we freeze online access immediately and replace every security method on the account. I nodded. My hands had stopped shaking completely. That frightened me a little. Panic had been noisy. This was quiet. This was something else. As Janet worked through the security steps, she asked whether I recognized the backup phone number. I said no. She asked whether I had recently changed my recovery email. I said no. Then she read the email address aloud, and I felt the last fragile thread of doubt give way. It was not Vanessa's name, not directly. It was something softer, something she would think looked harmless. FamilyFirst.vw. I almost smiled at that. Family First. That was what she always said when she wanted me to sign, agree, forgive, or move aside. When I left the bank, the morning sun had turned bright and sharp. I sat in my car with the envelope on my lap and did not call Michael. Not yet. Across the parking lot, my reflection stared back from the dark window of an automated teller machine. Gray hair, navy cardigan, tired eyes, but not helpless. Not anymore. The drive from the bank to Michael's house took 30 minutes, but I did not go there. I drove past the turn for his subdivision and kept going until I reached the small park near Mill Creek, where Robert and I used to walk on Sunday afternoons before his knees started aching in the cold. I parked beneath a sycamore tree and sat with the engine off, listening to the ticking sound it made as it cooled. The envelope from Janet Collins lay on the passenger seat like something alive. I had thought seeing Vanessa's name would make me angry in a loud way, the kind that pushes a person to call, accuse, demand answers. Instead, it made me strangely clear. I could see every small moment I had excused because I wanted peace more than truth. Vanessa offering to organize Robert's files the week after the funeral, while I stood in the hallway unable to decide what to do with his winter coat. Vanessa saying, "You are family, Eleanor. You should not have to worry about ugly details." Vanessa gently removing a stack of bank statements from my kitchen counter and sliding them into her tote bag because, as she put it, Michael does not want you stressing over numbers. At the time, her voice had sounded kind. Now I could hear the carefulness beneath it. Kindness gives you room to say no. Control makes no feel ungrateful. I thought about the first Thanksgiving after Robert died. I had made turkey for 6 even though only 4 people came, because cooking less felt like admitting he was gone. Vanessa arrived wearing a cream sweater and carrying a pumpkin cheesecake from an expensive bakery. She hugged me a little too long, then walked straight into the kitchen and began opening drawers as if she lived there. "Where do you keep the financial mail now?" she asked casually, while Michael carved the turkey in the dining room. I told her I kept everything in the desk by the window. She smiled and said, "Good. We should make sure nothing important slips through the cracks." That was the word she used when she wanted ownership without asking permission. "We should update your phone. We should simplify your accounts. We should talk about whether this house is too much for you." Another memory came back so sharply I had to close my eyes. 3 months earlier, Vanessa had invited me to lunch at a little place near her office. She ordered for both of us before I finished reading the menu, saying she remembered that I liked chicken salad. I did like chicken salad, but not with grapes, and she had never noticed that. After lunch, she pulled out her tablet and said the bank needed updated family contact information. "Just in case of an emergency," she said. "Michael worries, even if he does not always." "Say it." She placed the tablet in front of me. The screen showed boxes and lines in small print that seemed to swim when I looked at it too long. I remember feeling embarrassed. I remember wishing Robert were there to read it for me, not because I was incapable, but because grief makes even ordinary things feel like climbing stairs in the dark. It is just trusted access, Vanessa said. Not control, just a safety net. I signed with my finger. A crooked version of my name appeared on the screen. Vanessa smiled before I even handed the tablet back. That smile had looked relieved. I had mistaken it for affection. Sitting in the park, I opened my purse and found a peppermint candy from the bank. Janet must have slipped it into the envelope, the same kind Robert used to take for me. I held it in my palm and thought about how many women my age get trained to doubt themselves. Forget one appointment, and people start speaking slower. Ask one question about technology, and suddenly everyone assumes you are confused. Need help after losing your husband, and someone may decide help gives them ownership. My phone rang, and Michael's name appeared. For one soft second, my heart reached for him the way it had when he was 7 years old and came home crying because boys at school had laughed at his glasses. Then I remembered Vanessa answering his phone in the middle of the night. I let it ring. A minute later, a text arrived from him. Mom, Vanessa says you are upset about some bank thing. We should talk when you are calmer. I read it twice. Some bank thing. Calmer. Not, are you all right? Not, what happened? Not, I am coming over. I placed the phone face down on my lap and looked at the walking trail ahead of me, the same path Robert and I once took hand in hand. The trees were bare, but the sky behind them was bright. I knew then that I could not walk into this as a mother begging her son to believe her. I had to walk in as a woman with documents, names, times, and signatures. Love had made me patient. Grief had made me trusting. But now the truth was making me careful. By the time I pulled into my driveway again, the sun had climbed high enough to make the frost on the lawn disappear. The house looked ordinary from the street. White shutters, brick steps, 2 empty planters Robert had always promised to fill with marigolds in spring. Ordinary things can be cruel when your life has just changed. They stand there unchanged, pretending nothing has happened. I carried the briefcase inside, locked the front door, and placed Janet's envelope on the dining room table. That table had held birthday cakes, tax returns, Thanksgiving dishes, and once, a science project Michael built in 6th grade with cardboard, glue, and too much confidence. Now it held the first proof that someone close to me had reached into my life and taken what was not theirs. I made myself a fresh cup of coffee, not because I wanted it, but because my hands needed something familiar to do. Then I called Harold Bennett. Harold had been Robert's attorney for nearly 25 years, a careful man with silver eyebrows, quiet shoes, and a voice that made even bad news sound organized. His assistant said he was in a meeting. I said my name and told her it concerned Robert Whitaker's estate and a possible unauthorized transfer. The line went silent for less than 10 seconds before Harold came on himself. Eleanor, he said, and the warmth in his voice nearly broke me. Tell me exactly what happened. I did. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. I gave him the time of the notification, the amount, the bank branch, Janet's name, the Charleston escrow account, the trusted access authorization, the recovery email, and Vanessa's name on the contact line. When I finished, Harold did not rush to reassure me, and I respected him for that. False comfort is just another way of asking a frightened person to be quiet. Do not call Michael again, he said. Do not confront Vanessa. Do not sign anything. Do not respond to any message about money, doctors, memory, safety, or family arrangements. Bring everything to my office today. I looked toward the hallway, where Robert's coat still hung in the closet. Harold, I asked, did Robert ever say anything to you about Vanessa? There was a pause long enough for me to hear the refrigerator hum. Come in, Eleanor, he said. There are things we should discuss in person. His office was downtown, on the 2nd floor of a red brick building above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and butter. Robert used to joke that Harold chose the location so clients would be too hungry to argue over fees. I parked behind the building and sat for a moment with my hand on the briefcase handle. Part of me was afraid of what Harold knew. Another part was more afraid that Robert had seen something I refused to see. Harold met me at the door himself. He did not shake my hand. He took the briefcase from me like it was heavy, which it was, though not because of the paper inside. In his office, the blinds were half open, striping his desk with pale winter light. He reviewed Janet's documents first, then the folder Vanessa had given me 3 months earlier. He turned each page slowly. When he reached the signature page, his mouth tightened. "This is not your standard signature." "It was on a tablet," I said. "She told me it was only emergency access." Harold removed his glasses and placed them on the desk. Trusted access can be limited, but this language was not limited. It was written broadly enough to request transfers, authorize contact changes, and interact with outside closing offices. My stomach sank, but I did not interrupt. He opened a locked file drawer and took out a cream-colored envelope with Robert's handwriting across the front. "For Eleanor, if Harold believes it is necessary." I reached for it, then stopped. Robert's handwriting looked alive. Strong, slanted, familiar. Harold slid it toward me. He prepared this about 6 months before he passed. I opened the envelope with more care than I had used for anything in months. Inside was a short letter and a legal addendum. The letter began, "Ellie, forgive me if this feels overprotective." I read the first line twice before the words steadied. Robert wrote that he had become concerned by the way Vanessa asked about beneficiary designations, property titles, and whether I understood online banking. He did not accuse her of anything outright. That was Robert. Fair even in suspicion. But he had added protections to the estate. If any family member used pressure, misrepresentation, or unauthorized access to interfere with my assets, that person and anyone knowingly helping them would lose any remaining inheritance tied to Robert's trust. I pressed the letter flat with both hands. The room blurred, but I did not cry loudly. I only let the tears fall because there was no one in that office asking me to be convenient. Harold waited. After a while, I whispered, "He knew." Harold's voice softened. He worried. "There is a difference. But he loved you enough to prepare for the possibility." I folded Robert's letter and held it against my chest. For 18 months, I had believed I was alone in protecting what we built. But Robert had left one final hand on the gate. Vanessa had not just taken money. She had stepped into a trap built by the man she thought was gone. Harold did not let me leave his office with only Robert's letter and a frightened heart. He made 3 copies of every document, placed the originals in a sealed folder, and called Janet Collins while I sat across from him with my hands folded in my lap. I listened to their conversation as if it belonged to someone else. Words like fraud review, escrow hold, device history, identity verification, and signed authorization moved through the room with a cold precision that made the situation feel both terrifying and strangely manageable. Harold was not emotional. Janet was not emotional. That helped me stay steady. Panic had made me feel small, but procedure gave me edges again. When Harold ended the call, he turned to me and said, "The money has not fully cleared to the closing office yet. There is still time to freeze it, but we need Vanessa to believe nothing has changed." I looked at him for a long moment. "You want me to act like I do not know?" He nodded. "I want you to protect yourself before you reveal what you know." That sentence stayed with me. All my life, I had been taught that honesty meant saying everything immediately, especially to family. If something hurt, talk it out. If someone misunderstood, explain. If there was conflict, smooth it over before dinner got cold. But sitting in Harold's office, holding the letter from my dead husband, I realized some people do not use your honesty as a bridge. They use it as a map. Vanessa had used every open door I gave her. My grief, my politeness, my fear of being difficult, even my love for Michael. Harold slid a yellow legal pad toward me. "We need a record from this moment forward. Every call, every message, every request. Do not delete anything." I almost told him I was not good with all of that, then stopped myself. That was Vanessa's voice living in my head, not mine. I had raised a child, managed a household, cared for Robert through his illness, handled insurance forms after his passing, and kept myself standing when the left side of the bed went cold. I could keep a record. Before I left, Harold helped me draft a simple message to Vanessa. Not accusing, not revealing, just weak enough to make her comfortable. I wrote, "Vanessa, I am overwhelmed and tired. Maybe you were right that I need help sorting out the financial things. Can you send me whatever forms you think I should look at?" My finger hovered over send. It felt wrong to sound helpless on purpose. Then I remembered her voice at 2 in the morning asking why I was checking my bank account, and I tapped the screen. Her reply came in less than 4 minutes. "Of course, Eleanor. I only want what is best for you." I stared at those words while Harold watched quietly. A second message followed almost immediately. It might be smart to sign a broader authorization so Michael and I can prevent this kind of scare from happening again. I will email it over. Harold raised one eyebrow. That was fast. She thinks I am tired, I said. She thinks tired means easy. By the time I got home, the email was waiting. The subject line read Family Protection Forms. I did not open it on my phone. Harold had told me not to. Instead, I forwarded it to his office and copied the new secure email Janet had created for me at the bank. Then I made tea and sat in the dining room while my house settled into the afternoon. Outside, the mail truck stopped at the curb. A neighbor's dog barked twice. Somewhere down the street, a lawn crew started. A leaf blower, even though most of the leaves were already gone. Ordinary sounds. Steady sounds. I let them remind me that I was still here. Vanessa called at 4:15. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 4:20. Then Michael called. I let his call go too. A minute later, Vanessa sent a text. Eleanor, please do not ignore us. Michael is worried. That was clever. She put his name in front of her urgency like a shield. I waited 10 minutes before answering. I am resting. I will look at everything tonight. Her response came quickly. Good. And please do not let outsiders scare you. Banks make mistakes. Lawyers overcomplicate things. Family should handle family. I read that last sentence several times. Family should handle family. It sounded warm until you understood what she meant. No witnesses. No records. No one outside the circle she controlled. I took a screenshot, wrote the time on Harold's legal pad, and placed the phone face down. For the first time since Robert died, I did not feel ashamed of my silence. My silence had purpose now. It was not surrender. It was a locked door. That evening, I ate tomato soup at the kitchen counter because setting the dining table for one still hurt. Robert's letter lay beside me, folded neatly in its envelope. I did not read it again. I did not need to. I could feel the shape of his warning in the room with me. Vanessa thought she was guiding a confused widow toward another signature. She did not know that every message she sent, every form she forwarded, every sweet little sentence about family was being placed carefully into a file. And for once, I was not the one being studied. She was. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, though I had barely slept. The house was still dark, and for a moment I lay perfectly still, listening to the quiet. There had been a time when mornings began with Robert clearing his throat in the bathroom, the smell of coffee drifting up the stairs, the newspaper landing against the front door with a soft slap. Now mornings began with memory. I got dressed slowly, choosing a gray blouse, black slacks, and the pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 30th anniversary. Not because I was going anywhere special yet, but because I needed to feel like myself. Vanessa had mistaken my loneliness for weakness. I would not make the same mistake. At 8:30, Harold called and told me the new authorization form Vanessa had emailed was worse than he expected. It did not simply allow her and Michael to help me with banking. It gave them access to investment accounts, permission to communicate with financial institutions on my behalf, and authority to approve real estate decisions if I was considered unable or unwilling to manage personal affairs. I repeated the phrase quietly. Unable or unwilling. That is not protection, I said. No, Harold replied. That is a net. He told me the document metadata showed it had been created from Vanessa's laptop the previous afternoon, less than an hour after she texted me. He also said Janet's fraud team had located device records tied to the original $300,000 transfer. The request had come from an internet connection registered to Michael and Vanessa's home. My first feeling was not surprise. It was sorrow, deep and dull, because Michael's house had once been the place where I kept extra mittens for the grandchildren I thought I might have someday. Now it was the place from which someone had reached into my account. Does Michael know? I asked. Harold was quiet. We do not know yet. That matters. We need to separate what he knew from what he failed to question. That sentence hurt more than I wanted to admit. There are betrayals of action, and there are betrayals of absence. Michael may not have typed the transfer. He may not have created the form. But he had allowed his wife to stand between us for so long that I no longer knew where my son ended and Vanessa began. At 10 o'clock, Vanessa texted again. Michael and I think we should all sit down tonight. No lawyers. Just family. I showed Harold. He advised me to agree, but only if we controlled the place. So I answered, I am too tired to come over. If we talk, it needs to be tomorrow at Harold Bennett's office. He has helped with Robert's papers for years, and I trust him. Her response took longer this time. Almost 20 minutes. Eleanor, involving an attorney will make Michael feel like you are attacking us. I stared at the sentence until the old version of me almost apologized. Almost. Then I wrote, I am not attacking anyone. I am protecting myself. She did not answer after that. The silence told me she was no longer comfortable. That afternoon, I went through every drawer in Robert's desk. I found old tax returns, warranty papers for appliances we no longer owned, a photograph of Michael at 12 holding a fishing rod, and a birthday card I had given Robert years ago. In the back of the bottom drawer, tucked inside a blue folder, I found something I had forgotten existed, a handwritten list Robert made titled, For Ellie, if paperwork gets confusing. It had account names, policy numbers, contact people, and notes in his practical block letters. Call Harold before signing anything new. Keep house title in your name. Do not let anyone rush you. I sat on the floor with the folder in my lap and covered my mouth with one hand. He had known me so well. Not foolish, not weak, just someone who trusted love to behave like love. By evening, Harold confirmed the escrow hold had been formally requested. The closing office in Charleston had been notified that the funds were under review. Vanessa would not know exactly how much we knew, but she would know something had gone wrong. At 7:12, my phone rang. This time it was Michael. I answered. Mom, he said, and his voice sounded tired, irritated, and distant. Vanessa is really upset. She says you are making this into something ugly. I looked across the room at Robert's empty chair. Michael, I said, $300,000 left my account without my permission. He sighed, not with concern, but with impatience. She said the bank flagged something and you got confused. She has been trying to help you. There it was. The real wound. Not the money. Not the forged access. My own son had been handed my fear, and he had returned it to me as confusion. I did not raise my voice. Tomorrow morning, come to Harold's office at 10. Why, he asked. Because if your wife is innocent, the documents will prove it. The line went quiet. Then he said, softer, and if she is not? I closed my eyes. For the first time, I heard a crack in him. Small but real. Then you will need to decide whether you want the truth or the story she gave you. I ended the call before he could ask me to make it easier for him. That night, I placed Robert's letter, Janet's envelope, Vanessa's new form, and the blue folder into the briefcase. I set it beside the front door. Then I turned off the lights one by one, not rushing, not shaking, not crying. Vanessa had asked for a family meeting. She was going to get one, just not the kind she expected. Harold's office felt different that morning, though nothing in it had changed. The same law books lined the shelves. The same brass lamp glowed on the corner of his desk. The same faint smell of cinnamon drifted up from the bakery downstairs. But I was not the same woman who had walked in the day before clutching a briefcase like a life preserver. I sat in the chair beside Harold's desk with Robert's letter in my purse and the documents arranged in a neat stack before me. Janet Collins was there too, not as a friend, but as a bank representative with a folder of verified records and a face that revealed nothing. At exactly 10 o'clock, we heard voices in the hallway. Vanessa entered first. Of course she did. She wore a camel-colored coat, pearl earrings larger than mine, and the kind of soft expression people use when they want witnesses to believe they are patient. Michael followed behind her, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine. That hurt, but I did not let it show. Vanessa looked around the room and gave a small laugh. Eleanor, this feels a little formal for a family misunderstanding. Harold stood. Please sit down, Mrs. Whitaker. She smiled at him as if charm had always been a currency that worked. Vanessa is fine. Mrs. Whitaker, he repeated, and for the first time, her smile thinned. Michael sat heavily in the chair across from me. Mom, can we please just talk like normal people? I looked at him. My son had Robert's eyes, but none of his steadiness that morning. That is why we are here, I said. To talk with records instead of guesses. Vanessa reached for Michael's hand on the armrest. This is exactly what I was afraid of. She is overwhelmed, and now strangers are making her think we did something wrong. Janet opened her folder. Harold did not look at Vanessa. He looked at Michael. $300,000 was transferred from your mother's savings account into an escrow account tied to a residential property purchase in Charleston, South Carolina. The transfer was initiated using trusted family access added to her profile 3 months ago. Michael blinked. Charleston. His head turned toward Vanessa. It was quick, but I saw it. A small movement toward the first question. Vanessa squeezed his hand. We talked about maybe investing in property someday. That does not mean anything. Janet placed the transaction summary on the table. The escrow contact listed is Vanessa Whitaker. The room went quiet enough that I could hear the clock above Harold's bookcase. Michael's face changed. Not fully. Not yet. But something in him slowed down. Vanessa leaned forward. That must be from the real estate office. They probably used my name because I made a call asking questions. This is being twisted. Harold slid the next paper forward. This is the trusted access authorization. This is the recovery email added the same week. This is the backup phone number. This is the device record showing the transfer request came from the internet connection registered to your home. Vanessa's cheeks colored, but her voice stayed smooth. Michael handles our internet account. That proves nothing. Michael pulled his hand away from hers. She noticed. So did I. Harold then placed the new authorization form on top of the stack, the one Vanessa had emailed me after I pretended to be tired and uncertain. This document was created yesterday afternoon on a device registered to you, Vanessa. It expands access to Mrs. Whitaker's investments, banking communications, and real estate decisions. You sent it less than 1 hour after she asked you for help. Vanessa looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood. The tired widow she thought she was guiding had been standing still long enough for her to walk into the open. I was trying to protect her, she said. Her voice sharpened at the edges. Someone had to. She forgets things. She gets confused by basic technology. Michael knows that. I did not flinch. I had expected that word. Confused. It had been waiting in her mouth since the first time I asked a question she did not want to answer. Michael turned to me slowly. Mom, did you know about the Charleston house? No. Did you approve that transfer? No. Did you ask Vanessa to create these papers? No. 3 small answers. 3 doors closing. Vanessa stood suddenly, then seemed to remember where she was and sat back down. You are all making me look like some criminal because I try to keep this family organized. Harold's voice remained even. Robert anticipated this possibility. At the sound of my husband's name, Vanessa went still. Harold placed the cream-colored envelope on the table, but did not open it. Mr. Whitaker added a condition to the trust. Any family member who uses pressure, misrepresentation, or unauthorized access to interfere with Eleanor's assets forfeits remaining benefits tied to that trust. Michael stared at the envelope as if his father had walked into the room and taken a seat beside me. Vanessa whispered, "That cannot be real." I finally spoke to her directly. That is what you never understood about Robert. He did not need to be loud to protect me. Her eyes moved from me to Michael, searching for the place where she usually hid. But Michael was no longer looking at her. He was reading the papers, one by one. The transfer, the email, the form, the device record, the Charleston escrow contact. With every page, his face lost a little more certainty. I had imagined this moment might satisfy me. It did not. Watching your child discover the truth is not victory. It is grief wearing a different coat. Michael's voice came out low. Vanessa, tell me this is not what it looks like. She opened her mouth, but for once, no polished sentence arrived. I gathered Robert's letter back into my purse and stood slowly. My knees ached, and my heart felt older than it had when I entered, but my voice was steady. Your father protected me from strangers, I said to Michael. I never thought he would have to protect me from family. Then I turned toward the window, where the morning light was cutting clean across Harold's desk, and I let the silence do what my pleading never could. The silence in Harold's office did not end with shouting. That almost made it heavier. Vanessa did not confess in one clean sentence the way people do in movies. She folded and refolded the edge of her coat, denied small pieces, blamed confusing forms, blamed the real estate office, blamed the bank, then finally blamed me for being too emotional after Robert. Michael sat beside her as if the chair beneath him had disappeared. I watched his face while Harold explained the next steps, the escrow hold, the fraud review, the trust condition, the written statements, the account protections. My son looked older with every word. Not wiser yet, just older. Janet confirmed that the funds would remain frozen while the investigation continued, and because the transfer had been challenged before the closing was completed, there was a strong chance the money would be returned. Vanessa whispered something about misunderstanding. Harold answered with dates, forms, device records, and signatures. She had built her story out of softness. He answered it with paper. When the meeting ended, Michael did not leave with Vanessa right away. She stood near the door, pale and stiff, waiting for him to follow. For the first time in years, he did not move when she expected him to. "Go home, Vanessa," he said quietly. She stared at him. "Michael." He looked at the documents spread across the table. "Not with me." She left without another word, and the click of the office doors sounded final in a way no argument ever could. After she was gone, Michael turned toward me, and I saw the boy he had been under the man who had failed me. His eyes were wet, but I did not reach for him. Not because I did not love him, because love had already cost me too much when it was asked to work without truth. "Mom," he said, "I am sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. There had been a time when those two words from him could fix almost anything. A broken vase, a missed birthday call, a careless remark at dinner. But this was not a broken vase. This was 18 months of distance, doubt, and allowing another person to make me smaller in his mind. "You did not lose me in one night, Michael," I said. "You let go of me a little at a time, every time you chose not to look." He lowered his head, and I let him sit with that. A week later, the $300,000 was returned to a new protected account at a different bank. Janet personally called me when the final confirmation came through. I thanked her, then sat at my kitchen table and stared at the number until it stopped feeling like rescue and started feeling like responsibility. Harold updated my estate documents, removed every questionable access point, and helped create the Robert Whitaker Sr. Trust, a small fund meant to help older widows get legal and financial advice before their families convinced them they were confused. It was not grand. It would not save everyone. But it was something useful made from something ugly, and Robert would have liked that. Michael came by twice that month. The first time, I did not invite him inside. We stood on the porch while he apologized again, this time without explaining, without defending, without asking me to forgive quickly so he could feel better. The second time, I let him in for coffee. We spoke carefully, not warmly, not yet, but honestly, which was more than we had done in years. Vanessa moved out of their house before spring. What happened between them after that was Michael's burden to carry, not mine. I stopped asking questions that were not mine to answer. I changed the locks, replaced the old computer, bought a small shredder for the desk, and learned to use every security feature Janet recommended. At first, each new password felt like proof that the world had become colder. Then, slowly, it began to feel like a fence around a garden I still had the right to keep. In early May, I drove to Charleston by myself. Not for the house Vanessa had tried to buy with my money, but for the ocean Robert and I had once loved. I rented a modest cottage for 1 week, nothing fancy, just a porch, a white rocking chair, and a view of the water if I leaned a little to the left. On the first morning, I made coffee and carried it outside. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen and warm wood. A gull cried somewhere above the rooftops. My phone rested on the small table beside me, silent. For the first time in a long while, I did not pick it up with fear. That night, I had thought I was losing $300,000. But what I really lost was the illusion that family could never take from me. What I gained was quieter, stronger, and entirely mine. My name, my judgment, my dignity, and the right to say no without explaining why.